Hey, beautiful souls, it's Kevmo here. In this video, I wanted to talk about my coming out journey as a gay man back maybe over 10 years ago now, but nonetheless wanted to share my journey, some of the challenges I've had, and some advice that I have to my younger self to that if I could have mentored or supported them at the time, the type of advice that I'd give. So starting off for me, going back all the way into middle school, I kind of knew something. Well, once I started noticing men more, and I noticed I wasn't really noticing women quite as much. At that time, kind of a lot of things were confusing, but I kind of figured, I'll eventually like girls. That's just puberty at that time and trying to figure things out. Just kind of figured that would come into play at some point. But yeah, pretty much going into like high school and college, I realized my attraction for men was still there. And pretty much in middle school and high school, I had pretended to be straight, and even into a little bit of college. To yeah Pretended to be straight because quite honestly I didn't accept myself I didn't really accept um, myself as being gay. I didn't see gay as a good thing. I had a lot of friends and whatnot that would use gay as like a slur, as something kind of negative. And growing up in a religious background, that was something too that wasn't really looked highly upon because it was seen as sinful in God's eyes, and not like something that like you're supposed to practice or a lifestyle you're supposed to really do. In addition to, like, I think also what kind of made things challenging is like um at that time, growing up, like it was hard for me to kind of really accept myself as potentially being gay. I didn't really have a whole lot of like role models or support around this. So it's not like you really like take a class on like, hey, what's your sexuality, or like explore different dynamics or kinks or fetishes, stuff like that. In some ways it's pretty much just kind of like assumed that like if you're a guy, you're into girls, if you're a girl, you're into guys. And so I'd have people ask me, oh, do you have a girlfriend yet, or like when are you gonna get a girlfriend, sort of thing. Or like even going to like a dance or like a school event, it was kind of always assumed for me that it had to ask a girl out. So honestly, most of my childhood upbringing, and in adolescent years, I pretty much lived in the closet, as they would say. I didn't want people to find out about that I liked men. Like, when I would, as I started learning that my sexual attraction was towards them, that was definitely a secret that continued to get um, further buried for me, and I had to do more and more work in order to be able to hide that part of myself. There were also times in high school and college where others had kind of made jokes about me being gay, and I obviously like really didn't like that because like I was that was like a secret about me that I didn't want revealed. And but I knew it was likely true. um, but I also kind of so that was definitely hard to kind of hide from that fear of like you know run from that fear that everybody like thinks you're gay, even though like I try to present myself as straight, and kind of present myself as like normal, or something that society would accept. So going into college, it wasn't really until like maybe my like sophomore year where I started kind of being like, you know what, like I kind of got to quit putting on this facade. I just want to be me. And that's when I kind of started looking into, the concept of like online dating. So that's when I ended up like meeting a few guys and, kind of confirming that I was interested in them. And, I was slowly, letting go of my, the belief that I had to be straight and I had to be, in order to be accepted in God's eyes, or, um, um, yeah, just accepted, in my peers' eyes or my family's eyes, my parents' eyes. Um, that, yeah, I didn't want to be, that gay person that, kind of, was, kind of on the outskirts that like nobody, really liked because people didn't accept that at the time. So looking back to my younger self, that was hiding like this, I wish I could have, looked at, looked at him, 16-year-old Kev. I'm gonna look at myself, uh, in this video and, kind of, I, I guess at that time I would say to myself, Kev, like it's totally okay for you to be gay. You th- this is who you are. You didn't choose who you're attracted to. You didn't it's not like you're like going against what you're brought up with or what other society had. It doesn't mean it doesn't matter like what anybody else thinks. You are perfect as you are. And being gay is who you is part of who you are. Um and there's nothing wrong with that. And the church could say that it's sinful, but you know what, let them say that it's sinful, because you're not choosing anything different. And choosing to live something other than you, being gay, would be a lie. So that kind of goes into like, maybe I think the biggest pivotal point for me when I was in my junior year. I had kind of started seeing a few guys here and there, going on some dates, and um, but there was also like a couple girls that like I had seen that like I was like, you know what, maybe I could like be straight, and I could kind of like show everybody that I was in fact straight, and I really was happy, and almost kind of like prove, see to myself, could I be really interested in girls? Obviously, I like girls as friends and humans, but from a sexual and romantic, standpoint, obviously not quite as much. So I remember there was someone, in my school, my junior year in college, that I was like, do I legitimately pursue them or not? And I remember, obviously, like, maybe not obviously, but for me it was obvious, like in the sense of like, well, if I pursue a girl, then that would definitely, kind of help me kind of check as many boxes, and make as many people happy as I could. But I deep down didn't really feel like it would be the right thing for me. So that's when, and I also thought, like, I remember like laying in bed in my dorm room, like thinking like, could I realize really see myself, you know getting married with this person, having kids, and like, 20, 30 years in the future, really actually still being happy. And I thought to myself, um, you know, I could really envision myself, going through with it, just to kind of like put on a facade, like go get married, and, have kids, and really keep trying to make it work. But deep down, like knowing, like, behind scenes, like maybe if I'm, going to go masturbate, or look at porn, kind of what I'm really into, as being my real truth. So, pretty much at that point, that's when I was like, well, this if I were to go through with that kind of a life, that'd be essentially living a lie. I'd be living a lie to my, potential wife at the time, um, and maybe kids. I still think I could be an amazing dad. And whatnot. We've got three huskies here, and I enjoy taking care of them, like they're my kids, because they are. But I think it would be also like so unfair. I think so unfair to, my potential wife, and I couldn't see myself like actually lying to someone, and having to go, like, imagine going through with like a wedding, standing on the altar saying, I love you, and all these vows, stuff like that. I couldn't imagine actually like saying all that and like not really feeling it. And also, like, I would want my partner to really feel it, feel their my love for them. And I wouldn't want, yeah, I kind of started realizing that I don't want to do that to someone. They deserve the love, attention, and care, um, for them. And I don't necessarily, I don't want, not necessarily. I definitely don't want to be stringing someone along in that sense, only to be hiding how I truly felt. So pretty much once I kind of deducted that reasoning in my head, I was like, okay, like I don't really care what the church says. Like if the church says like being gay is sinful, um, and then I guess I'm gonna be sinful. And maybe and just from my perspective, I'm like, maybe the church is wrong. Like it's not like it. I get like man and woman and procreating, but like I was not born that way. So I don't know why they would teach me to um, force me into a relationship with someone just to do what the Bible says. So that's really when I started kind of questioning my beliefs about the church, and versus how I really felt, and started really thinking I got to start choosing me and kind of stop like you know pleasing everyone and the entities that seem to have that I seem to be kind of like feeling judged by, and trying to please so that they're not making fun of me, like I've maybe seen them do for other people. And it definitely helped be living alone at this time while I was kind of contemplating this, because yeah, it was just like a lot of time for self reflection, and a lot of time and space for me to kind of just really get a sense of what I wanted to value, and what I most wanted to value was truth. And for me, living my truth was to live out my sexual identity as it is, and not try to pretend anymore. I didn't want to be doing that to girls that I had seen for a period of time, and I didn't want to definitely not want to do it for anybody in the future, or potentially a wife that I would eventually have to likely admit to that I was gay and not want to be in that relationship. Now I know like, or I guess there are plenty of cases where like someone may be gay and they eventually later realize in their relationship that you know they are, and they communicate that to their spouse. So I'm not saying that that's bad per se, because people realize things, or make choices when they feel are they're right for them. But for me, I just, yeah, I at that time, since I wasn't married and through those stages of my life yet, I kind of just imagined myself if I were, and that wasn't the path that I had wanted. So um, that's pretty much what secured it for me, to stick to being gay and just letting it be, and just kind of seeing how things fall. And fortunately, I had met some pretty great guys too, that like I was like, okay, like at least I'd be happy in a romantic relationship with them, as opposed to being unhappy. In addition, in my junior year, that's when Lady Gaga came out with "Born This Way." So when she says "a different lover is not a sin," believe capital HIM, that to me was like a very like waking moment, where I thought to myself, "Wow!" Like that was the first time I had heard someone kind of affirm that being gay wasn't a sin, or having something other than like a heterosexual relationship wasn't wrong, and really kind of gave me the confidence to be at peace with that decision for myself. And I didn't necessarily come out to everybody per se, and that's maybe what I'll do this video, is kind of share it more kind of publicly. But I definitely wasn't afraid of people finding out that I was gay anyway. Um, and I felt, yeah, it felt very freeing. I remember hanging out with friends afterwards that I had typically hidden from, and I remember not telling them right away, but like having a lot more freeing energy with them. I felt, I wasn't trying to hide anything anymore. I could just kind of laugh and, just be present with them. And honestly, like the second half of my experience at college, a lot of really fun, positive memories. And I would attribute to feeling a lot more free about my sexuality, and not so scared of what people said behind my back, or if they thought I was gay, because I had knew and accepted that I was. So I think that like for my younger self, what I would say is 16-year-old Kev, it's okay to you accept and love you exactly as you are. I accept you. I accept you as future Kev um, in the future, 10, 15 years later, and um, I accept you completely for who you are. It is not a sin for you to be gay. In fact, you were meant to be, to have your sexuality and be your unique, vivacious self. So yeah, be your, you have permission to be yourself. You don't have to live in fear that you're going to hell. You don't have to live in fear that like, people are going to dislike you. And even if they do dislike you, because you can't please everybody, um, you have permission to love and accept yourself, um, for your sexuality and all of your sexual quirks that you end up learning, over the years. So with that, there's been I've definitely like I feel like my sexuality has evolved. I still consider myself gay. Um, I kind of say that like I could, maybe be into like a woman at some point. I'm or finds, oh, women attractive. I definitely can find women attractive. But yeah, like I would say like for a majority of it, it's men. And yeah, I'm much more open about that, and I'm much less worried or less scared to share that with people. Now, as I say that, so that's kind of my coming out journey. Maybe in the next video I'll go. I think maybe in the next video I'll talk about kind of like what my experience was like actually telling people, because like I said, I didn't really like tell people um, uh, right away. I It was just kind of more like if the time came up and it felt right, that's when I shared it with people. Um, so telling friends and family was kind of definitely an experience. A little bit more challenging because they're the closest people to me, and I wanted to be right in their eyes. Um, but then yeah, even to this day, even today, in 2025, there's times where I notice that I'm not hiding, but there are some things that like people say or do that like don't that do kind of remind me of like kind of the stigma that I felt when I was younger, trying to hide from being gay because I'd hear people, profess their certain, churchly values, or they would, talk about like they're going to church on Sunday, or they're doing X, Y, and Z's. I heard some of that today, and typically, and from my perspective, like when I hear, um, you know, I, my relationship with the church, I would say is it depends which church. I grew up Catholic, and I'm like I appreciate a lot of the values and like uh, I guess structure that it can Catholicism can provide. But obviously where I differ is the belief that you know acting on your homosexuality is sinful, and that it's not right, it's not just, and so whenever I hear like people that are you know very religious, in that sense, and kind of preaching Bible verses and stuff like that, especially when it comes to the Bible, there's just a lot of but there's just a lot of outdated methodologies and like teachings that it ultimately teaches that to I don't feel apply anymore, and are kind of rooted in a lot of control ultimately. So um, and I guess like people can still like go to church and not necessarily be homophobic per se, but like if you're going to if you say you're a gay ally, but you're going to church and you're teaching your kids that being gay is wrong, and sinful, and that like that only a man and woman can be together in a relationship, and get to heaven, to me that's not to me that's homophobic, because you're basically judging someone on something that they have no control over, their sexuality. So I know for me, I did not control who I, what brand of people I liked sexually, and so things like gay conversion therapy, I think is absolutely ridiculous, should be completely outlawed, totally unacceptable. Um, and but I know that kind of stuff still exists, and there are religious entities that still preach and teach that kind of stuff. So um, yeah, so there are times today where like I still hear things that kind of uh, not upset me, but I just kind of like, oh, like I'm getting a vibe of like, this is kind of like if you're bringing up a whole bunch of like church related things to me, might be a little bit of a bias in the sense like I'm making assumptions about like what you teach and profess. But those types of conversations are kind of challenging as a gay man still today, because when I hear that, it kind of flips a switch for me, thinking that they may not be supportive of me and my lifestyle, and my sexuality. Ultimately, I've learned how to let that go and really not let it bother me, but still can be a challenge today for sure. So, um, but yeah, that's my coming out journey. I hope this was relatively enjoyable. If you made it this far, thank you so much. I'd love to hear your thoughts or reactions in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you love this. And check out my link in the bio for some. If you're struggling with coming out in any way, whether you're any of the letters of the alphabet. Or just trying to if you're yeah especially if you're struggling with your sexual identity for any reason, um, happy to chat, and set up a discovery call, and yeah, kind of discuss maybe a coaching plan that we can set up that I can help you, yeah, be more comfortable and accepting of yourself, and yeah, live a more sexually free life. So, but yeah, thanks for watching. I appreciate you all. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you in the next one.